Hi, welcome to Break Time with Brakeman. I have with me today Kyle Bragg, who's the president of SEIU 32BJ. And before I turn it over to Kyle, Kyle and I sort of came into these positions at somewhat of the same time. Me under much better circumstances than Kyle. Kyle is the predecessor of Hector Figueroa, who everybody knows died very tragically. And so Kyle got thrown quickly into his position. So we've sort of forged an alliance as new leaders trying to navigate really challenging things like the world around us, Puerto Rico, and other things. So Kyle, I want to thank you for coming in, and sort of wanted to talk about two things, sort of how are your members doing? And I know they're slowly getting back to work, and how is your union doing? And then I really want to talk about the murder of George Floyd and sort of your hopes for change in that.
Well, thank you, Beverly. Thanks for having this conversation. I pray for your members every day, as I do for all union members, and particularly essential workers who have to continue to provide services to the public in these very unusual and trying times that we're in. And
Mm-hmm.
so I appreciate you lending this platform out to have a conversation with me about what's happening with my members at 32BJ. Is there any particular question that you just want me to start talking about?
Yeah, so I know you've had about 25,000 who lost their jobs like pretty quickly from the pandemic, and now you're starting to come back. What are the things people are most concerned about as we start to sort of reopen the economy?
Yeah, well, this is new for everybody, and we've been thinking about what the reopening of the economy will represent for our union, for other unions, for the labor movement, and for essential workers. Um, our members are essential workers. They have been keeping residential buildings clean, sanitized, safe, while people are sheltered in place. They're janitorial workers in commercial buildings where we've lost probably the greatest amount of our members between there and airport workers laid off. We now have probably about 20,000 of our members who have been laid off. People who are essential workers who've been making travel safe for
Hmm.
folks
Hmm.
for those who continue to travel, and office spaces safe and secure. Our security officers who work in these locations, and homeless shelters and others places where that work is both essential and necessary. But every day that they get up and leave their homes, they have to be concerned about whether or not they contract the virus or whether or not they transmit that back to their families when they come home. And so this reopening of the economy in our cities is very important. We want to make sure they are reopening, that labor has a voice and talks about the issues that are important to these essential workers and all workers as we get back into an open economy. And
Hmm.
so clearly we're concerned about PPE and how that continues, and that workers are continue to be thought about at first in the way of protecting them on their jobs and traveling to their jobs. Each city is a little different. We're in 11 states and Washington, D.C. Here in New York, it's been a challenge. Our members are going to work in a reduced transportation system. It's been
Hmm.
uh, really cut back, scaled back into a large degree, and they have to travel from home from work under uh, until just recently curfews.
Yeah.
Uh, we want to make sure that when they do go back to work, that they have the PPEs, the protections that they need, and the protocols that are necessary as more of the public are being engaged. That now the risk is escalated, as this pandemic is going to continue with us for the foreseeable future, and so we want to make sure that how we engage the public is also safe and in a way that helps to keep the transfers of these viruses down, and so that we can have a safe environment, both for the public and for our members.
Yeah.
We're worried about the schools reopening and how that impacts our children, our communities. And schools are located in communities. They're not in commercial, really situated in commercial areas. They're in communities. We want to make sure that if the K through 12s are open and that our members who are charged with making sure that schools are clean, sanitized, and safe, and that there are protocols in place that allows that condition every day as schools and teachers and all the other services around K to 12 come in to perform their respective jobs. We want those safe environments. And so, the reopening of this economy is extremely important. And it's important to all labor unions. It's certainly important to our members, but it's important to all the essential workers and other workers who will end up going back into an environment that's not remote anymore.
Well, my members are dependent on your members being, cleaning the buildings. And I mean, it's a really important, really important part. So yeah, it's just a lot, who would have ever thought when we got these jobs, we would be dealing with all of these crises along the way. And then who would ever think that, anything could overshadow this pandemic. And yet, the murder of George Floyd has really been a call to change that I've certainly not seen in my lifetime. And, as a white woman, privileged white woman, I feel very sort of introspective and somewhat ill-equipped to say anything meaningful. But I think our union probably stands very much in solidarity, as we always have with your union. But I'd like to ask you, what are your thoughts about what's going on, and what would you like to see come out of this? I really would like to listen.
Well, one, I'd say that we're all in this together, just like the pandemic. As we come out of it, and we're going to come out successfully, we have to do it together. And you're right. I mean, God knows couldn't imagine having to take over the helms of a union of 170,000 members across 11 states in DC with two crises to have to contend with. The crisis, obviously, of the corona virus, but then the crisis of racial injustice in this country that is now come to where it's at a boiling point through the death of Sandra Bland and George Floyd. And we should be clear that, what's happening in this moment, they're just linchpins.
Mm-hmm.
George Floyd, Sandra Bland, they're linchpin to ongoing crisis that exists in this country since its birth. That structural racism has been embedded in this nation, and what's happening in the streets of this country and worldwide is the telling sign of a system that has been abusive to people of color, been abusive to the Black community. There's unemployment, underemployment, healthcare disparities, educational disparities, voter suppression. I can go down the line, continue to name all the inequities and injustices that Black people and people of color have suffered in this country, and that this is a culmination of that with the police brutality and the police murders of unarmed, innocent Black men and women. And so it is a tragedy, and that's understatement, that we continue to see this happening on the streets of to people in this nation.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is, this is not new. I mean, it's not new to people of color, Black folks. We know what's been happening, and we know what our experiences have been. Technology has now brought it out of the shadows and into the light. So now that we see these video clips of the brutality that we have been subjected to since being in this country, unabated, unchecked,
Right.
And it's an impact not only on as a nation, obviously, and we're a nation divided, because if there's not equity for all, then how can we move forward as a nation together?
Mhm.
But our members are impacted directly as well, because it's the communities that have been impacted by COVID, the low wage Black, brown communities that have the greatest impact in the COVID crisis. And so this is playing itself out as well as we deal with this racial justice crisis, this bigotry in our country, that there's no equity for people of color, and that they are now greatly impacted by two viruses:
Yeah.
virus of racism and the virus of health.
Right.
And so my members all over our jurisdiction who have to go in to work every day and provide these vital services, up until, here in New York, up until recently, they had to do that on the threat of traveling through a curfew. So if you would only imagine a person of color, a Black man, a Black woman, having to travel from their job back to their home after curfew, and have to be then concerned as to whether or not they get stopped by the police and what that outcome is going to look like. They have to worry about their children, their spouses, their loved ones, as they traverse throughout this nation outside of their homes, and whether or not they will get to see them when they are returning, if they return from home, or return back to home or not. That's an anxiety that I can't even explain. Being a father of three, two young women, adult women, and an adult son, not knowing what lies outside of our home for them in the way of encountering law enforcement. So these are anxieties that I can't really begin to explain. The anxiety of me driving down the highway and seeing the lights of a cruiser come on, and the incredible relief that it passed me by.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it's for me to stop me, the anxiety and nervousness and the fear about what the outcome's gonna be, through no fault of my own. And so when I say that it's been a challenge, that's probably is an understatement.
Yeah.
But we're in this together. I mean, white, Black, brown, I don't care what where, what your background is, what your culture is. You have something to add in the moment, because being silent is not an option anymore.
Right.
And calling out the inequities, calling out the injustice, lends itself to the demand for change.
Right.
And we can no longer allow this country to be led by hate and division.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to work harder to make sure that voter suppression is beat.
Yeah.
That the ability for people to participate in this democracy is fair and equal,
Mm-hmm.
so that the people's voices will be heard. The thing about this moment that most encourages me is that I think that there's a real acknowledgement that this country is doomed unless something real change takes place here.
Yeah.
And hearing from the wide variety of people, wide range of people, both by economics and by background, by faith, by origins, who are standing out and standing up side by side with people of color, with Black people, and saying enough is enough.
Right.
That for this nation to be the great nation that we want to tout it to be, we have to once and for all rid it of structural and systemic racism. And so I know my members will continue to be on the front line on both of these virus fights. I pray every day that this country is ready and willing to create the space for the conversation, and also push forward real solutions that will bring some balance to the scales of justice in this country.
Yeah.
I'm not naive either. I don't think that racism is going to disappear tomorrow. That's just not a reality. But we can certainly attack the system that feeds it, and we can make some real changes that will create the necessary change for us all to be able to move forward.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I was at a rally the other day, and one of our state senators, asked the question, is this a moment or a movement? And it's a moment that is becoming a movement, I believe, and I know our union and your union and others, we're institutionally, need to get behind it. And we need to have the fights within our own ranks, around real criminal justice reform. And I know you and I have talked about that because
Absolutely.
it's not going to be easy, but it's a fight that we have to take on. So, we probably should stop there because people stop listening after 15 minutes, but we will continue this conversation because I have lots of questions about where things are with Puerto Rico for you too. But Kyle, I really want to thank you for joining us today and just for sharing both your personal and professional thoughts. It's very meaningful.
Thank you, Beverly. I'm very confident labor will continue to show up, as I know you have and your unions will. We have to show up. Our voices have to be heard on both these issues. I think it's important that labor has a say in how this economy reopens, and also a say in how we rid this country of racism and bigotry.
Absolutely.
So thank you. God bless you and your membership and your family.
You too, Kyle. Thanks.
Thank you.